In the name of God, who is love, beloved, and love overflowing. Amen. In 2013, I went on my first sabbatical. It was really awesome. I did a few things, such as, believe it or not, I went on a 7-day silent meditation retreat. Yes, it's hilarious that I, of all people, whom you can hear laughing from room to room, was able to stay quiet for that amount of time. In fact, one of the women I met there for the first time said, she's now one of my Facebook friends, she said when I entered the room, she could feel my energy because I was so excited. I was just like, but she could feel it. So apparently even quiet, I'm loud. So for 7 days, we would meditate, we would journal, we would reflect, and then we would repeat that every day with breaks for silent meals and plenty of time to walk the monastery grounds. It really was a wonderful experience. But then in addition to that, on that same sabbatical, I went to Ireland. And I went and I researched this. So I went to every holy site, cathedral, and shrine that I could find just in the Southern Republic of Ireland. So I began up in Dublin, which is sort of halfway between both the north and the south side of Ireland. Started in Dublin, went down to Kilkenny, to Tipperary. Yes, it was a long way. To Cork, to Kinsale, Kildare, Killarney, Kerry, Dingle, and all the way up to, so basically I did a great big U up to Galway and then cut through Clonmacnoise back to Dublin. And I had researched, where all these different holy sites would be and holy wells, which is very interesting. And one of the experiences I had there, in the midst of all my good research, which I really wasn't interested in going to castles, but in one of the towns we stayed in, there was a humongous castle in Kilkenny. And, I really felt like one of the disciples. You walk around, it's old buildings, and I love it all. I love all that historic stuff. But then you come upon this massive castle, and it's like, it's an awesome experience. I know what the disciples went through when they got to that temple and saw all those huge stones, massive structures of historic importance, never mind the spiritual importance. And, by the time I got back from seeing all of these ancient things, I know there was one bar/restaurant that we went in for lunch one day in Dublin. And my youngest son is 6'4", and the top of the doorway came to about here on him. It was fascinating stuff. So when I got back to the States, I looked at our antique shops and I thought, it's like talking about the 70s, the real antiques are over more so in Europe and all that. It's just fascinating stuff. I was also blessed enough on another sabbatical to go to Scotland, to Iona Abbey, and had amazing experiences. So again, I can identify with how awestruck the disciples were when they stood in front of that temple and just looked up. In our opening collect today, we asked God to help us learn from the scriptures so that we could ever hold fast the blessed hope of everlasting life. And that's a good thing, because while the disciples are standing in front of the great temple in Jerusalem, Jesus kind of interrupts their amazement, saying, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left on another. All will be thrown down." Well, what can we possibly learn from that, right? Well, thanks a lot, Jesus. You just popped my bubble of joy. But the fact is, he had very little time, limited time, right? Going back to Jerusalem again. But it was an important lesson. And that lesson was that everything is impermanent. It's something the Buddhists also teach. Yes, be amazed at whatever historic structures you're able to come upon, to look at with your own eyes and touch with your hands. But don't fall into the trap of creating an idol of those buildings, or the grandeur of those buildings anyway, whether they're for religious purposes or not. It's not a bad lesson to learn, to remember that those of us who are members, particularly of this little church, that God's presence is here just as much as it is in a grand cathedral or a grand temple, you know. The building does not define the level or amount of God's presence. God is equally present everywhere. God's glory and presence is just as much here, loving us and standing with us and strengthening us to meet the week ahead. So the lesson that everything is impermanent is very important. It reminds us to savor the moments when we do come upon something of great beauty, so we can learn not to rush the moment, but appreciate the moment. Another reason why the lesson of impermanence is important is that it's always good to be reminded during things like contentious elections that this too shall pass. If you don't like an experience you're having, this too shall pass. If you don't like an elected official, this too shall pass. If you don't like some kind of experience or some sort of big grave mistake where you know, what we call the hoof and mouth thing, where you say the wrong thing at the wrong time and it's in front of people, just, it's those things that keep you up at night in the middle of the night and you think, why did I say that? This too shall pass. Such an important lesson. Whether we experience something horrendous or something absolutely beautiful, it too shall pass. I think sometimes when we stop and, I mean, I'm so guilty of this, you know, stop to take pictures with my phone, you know, at these situations. Okay, do it, take your picture, but then just stand there and soak it in. I really have preached many times about how I think that God's first language is silence, but God's second language is also beauty. Because I feel so strongly that God comes to us through the beauty of music and art and love and compassion. And so just take a minute to drink it in, to savor it. Because no matter how we cling to anyone or anything or any experience, this too shall pass. Like the fog that disappears with the light of the morning sun. Some of us will have an experience such as the one in this passage, I'm sure many of you have, where Jesus describes a time when one will hear of wars and rumors of wars. And don't be overly alarmed, because every generation has had that experience. It is not unique to us. Every generation since the time of Jesus has said, oh, this is it. The end times, this is it. Well, yeah, there's been many end times, and something new is always birthed. Every generation experiences it. But unfortunately for some, it does create a level of anxiety, particularly if you've been kind of abused by fundamentalist religions. Some people will panic and try to position themselves in what they believe will be a safe place. And when I was thinking about this, the first thought that came to my mind was years ago, I remember a couple in the UK who apparently spent a good amount of time and money researching where they could find what they thought would be the safest place to live. After all their research, they decided to move to the Falkland Islands. You know what's coming. The year they moved there was 1982. And what happened? The undeclared war between the United Kingdom, UK, and Argentina in the Falkland Islands. I mean, what are the chances of this happening? The conflict only lasted 74 days with Argentina surrendering, but this is one of those cases where we make plans that don't necessarily pan out. Everything, including wars and rumors of wars, and even total bliss, is impermanent. Everything comes to pass, not to stay, until we cross over into the full presence of God. In fact, one of the reasons why we have a little table up here is because the lady in this framed picture is Janet Clark, and she was very important to our congregation, a big supporter of this congregation, and she used to watch us online. And unfortunately, her burial is happening when diocesan convention is happening this weekend, so many of us won't be able to attend her service up in Cheraw. But we wanted to honor her anyway. Everything is important, is impermanent. So it's important to savor your time with your loved ones, savor your experiences in the midst of beauty. The mistake that that couple made was to look for a perfect place, impervious to the changes and chances of impermanence. A perfect, untouched utopia of peace. To some extent, I think all of us have our moments when we wish the human race would finally evolve and really, really live in peace and compassion. Some look for it in money. Perhaps, that couple moving to the Falkland Islands looked for it in real estate. Sometimes we look for permanence in spouses and partners, in houses of worship, or some kind of geographical area, as I said with this couple. And as one of my clergy colleagues joked this week during a Bible study, they talked about the California psychics who actually advertise with the phrase, the joy of certainty. Well, good luck with that. That's what fuels fundamentalism, certainty, which promises all kinds of bliss, and that feels so good and comfortable and safe, rather than living in what I really believe is a day-by-day liminal experience of not knowing. We don't handle not knowing very well. I've said it many times. I've got claw marks in everything I've had to let go of. The truth is, certainty is the opposite of faith. Clinging to certainty prevents one from going into deeper levels of faith. Hence, my belief that fundamentalism keeps you on the surface of religion, whereas if you go into the impermanence of all things but God, you can go into deeper levels. This is what the dark night of the soul does, right? When everything falls apart, you learn to live in the strength of God's love and presence, trusting in that and nothing else. Sometimes we have those experiences, and they do have gifts hidden inside them. There are many, many moments, all of us know, when we have to live with total mystery, where we have no clue what the future will bring, but we keep putting one foot in front of the other, and we dedicate ourselves to a way of life the way Jesus taught. While I couldn't possibly prove the existence of God or even define God, because the minute you define God, you've lost it, right? But we do know we are, in some mysterious way, held together by a loving and somehow very personal energy of love that originates from something way greater than anything we could manipulate, fix, plan for, anything. Peace in the midst of uncertainty is the very experience of what Jesus called the peace that passes all understanding. And basically, there's a word for that, and it's called hope. That's hard to come by sometimes, I know. You can crush people under the boot of cruelty, but you can never completely conquer them if they have hope, particularly in a power greater than petty human beings who believe their reign will last forever. That's why Hannah and Mary, the mother of Jesus, were able to proclaim in their own day and age their song of joy in the midst of strife. It's also why St. Julian of Norwich, who living in a tiny little monastic cell, knowing they were burning people at the stake, Christians burning other Christians at the stake for not believing exactly the way they should, so to speak, she could still say, all shall be well. We're going to get past this. We're going to evolve past this. Petty tyrants who believe they will reign forever are unfamiliar, apparently, or choose to be unfamiliar with the word impermanence. Similar to the ancient Israelites, we too are on a lifelong pilgrimage, heading toward the promised land, which is not a geographic place with one special tribe that we happen to be in, but all of you aren't. Can you see how childish that really is? The promised land is a space of the full presence of God, where peace and justice and compassion reign. Sometimes, again, like the ancient Israelites, we're going to experience hardship along the way as we fight for justice, as we fight against injustice. But through those hardships, we will learn about what needs to change, not in everybody else, but in us. What in us needs to change? You know, it's like that old saying, Barbara Van Teller, I'm sure I said it last week, I'll say it again. Sometimes things don't happen to you, they happen for you, so that you will evolve. And we are so desperate for human beings to evolve past all their petty scapegoating. We are so in need of more evolution. When I was thinking about these scriptures and this whole idea of impermanence, or fact, I should say, I thought of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was able to say in his mountaintop speech, well, I don't know what will happen now. That's uncertainty. We've got some difficult days ahead. That's reality. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. That's faith and that's hope. And I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over and I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so I'm happy tonight. This is a man who knew he was going to go down. I mean, let's face it. There were so many people who were out to kill this man, shut him up, and stop the civil rights movement. I may not get there, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm so happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. That is not Pollyanna. That is a choice to live by, a hope that is based in reality. a faith-filled hope that can spit in the eye of despair, but walk victoriously one day at a time. That's all we need to worry about, the day we're in. There are many times when I say to myself, okay, Eunice, where are your feet? It's not in tomorrow, and it's not 5 years from now. It's not 4 years from now. I'm in today. And somehow, God's justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, as the prophet Amos said, if we're willing to do the work to help God manifest that kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. You know, for so many centuries, Christians have all been talking about, oh, it's all about heaven. It's all about heaven. And we destroyed the earth with that garbage. We have to also manifest Christ in this world by caring for Mother Earth, by caring for our rivers and oceans and streams, by caring for people different than us so that they get the same justice that we get. The only thing I can be certain of is that in the midst of impermanence, injustice, and even joy, God is faithful and will strengthen us for the journey. The days of hand-wringing and anxiety will pass, and with God's help, we too will get through whatever difficult times befall us until we get to the promised land of divine love, compassion, equality, and justice. So we can finally experience. I mean, Jesus was not Pollyanna, let's face it. So when he said, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow brings worries of its own. Trust in God, move your feet, work for justice, and continue to show compassion. Why is that important? Because we all know that some people who try to work for justice end up becoming the very enemies that they're fighting with their anger issues. Work for justice, pray for peace, live in compassion, and may God's will ultimately be done. Amen.